Um, it is so important because first of all, we need to learn how to make healthy connections and relationships with other women. Number 1.
Mhm.
Um, number 2, in recovery, a lot of times we are very uncomfortable in the way that we feel. We are uncomfortable in our body, right? We hear people say it all the time when they're telling their story. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. Well, when you take the substances away and you're in early recovery, you really don't feel comfortable. And
Yeah,
you're looking
good
for
point.
things to put on top of it. And what a better thing to use for escape
Yeah,
than relationships and sex, right?
right.
So that is that will distract us from taking that time to work on ourselves.
The great, the great Jamie Tall. We finally connect. So good to see you. Welcome to M to the Rock.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Where are you at, Jamie?
I am in Athens, Georgia.
Athens, Georgia. That's right. The Falcons. You a Falcons fan?
Actually, I'm on a UGA campus, so it's Bulldogs. It's
Yeah.
Bulldog country out here, and they take it
Oh,
very seriously.
well, y'all put it on my Texas Longhorns, so we really appreciate that embarrassment. Jamie Tall is a video creator. She's a recovery coach, a YouTube content creator, a recovery advocate, and a hope dealer, and works with so many people. And I came across one of your posts and made a comment on it saying, "Man, what a great message! You do a lot of snippets and a lot of reels, and I love seeing transparency and vulnerability." And I saw that in you, and you reminded me we chatted many years ago, and so we finally connect, and we're so glad to have you on the show. We'll have all of Jamie's social media handles, every way that you can get in contact with her in the description. Make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also make sure you share it out, because when you share it out, someone will hear the message that Jamie's about to bring and maybe save their life. And that's what it's all about at M to the Rock. And once again, we appreciate your generous donations to our nonprofit in order to keep this show running, and also to help people and send them to people like Jamie to get them help. So let's get into the show. Jamie, so excited about. Tell us what you do.
So I have a few jobs. I do a lot in the Athens community. Athens is such an amazing little town. I call it crunchy granola out here because it's very like free spirited, kind of hippie-ish, kind of like love, unity. And so in Athens, generally, either you work with the university or you are part of one of our many, many recovery community organizations or treatment centers. And so I do a lot of work in the recovery community. Like you said, I'm certified through the Georgia Council for Recovery as a certified addiction recovery empowerment specialist and a certified peer specialist for addicted disease. And
Wow.
so I get to do a lot of mentorship and working with a bunch of different organizations and really just trying to figure out how we can better serve and help the people in our community.
That's beautiful, and what you're doing today. But there's a story behind that. As a kid, you weren't playing with your friends at the age of 6 years old and say, "Hey, I'm going to be um, all this stuff: a recovery coach, a life coach, an advocate for recovery, and doing videos on helping people get off drugs and alcohol." So there's a connection here, and why don't you share that with me a little bit of what it was like?
Yeah, I grew up in a household with very young parents. They were like 15 when they had me. And I'm 44 and I can't handle being a parent half the time. So I don't know how they did it at 15. But, father was an alcoholic and it was just kind of one of these households where it was like you never knew what you were going to come home to. Was I going to come home to, my dad wanted to watch scary movies and eat celery and cream cheese, or was I going to come home to him stomping the whole house and putting his hands on my mom? So it was kind of one of these deals, and it had me grow up believing and not understanding the definition of what love looked like, what a healthy relationship looked like, security, any of those things. And that led me into, trying to be around people who accepted what I thought was acceptance and love. And, that happened to be drug dealers and people who use substances. That was where I felt my acceptance and where I didn't feel scared or unsure. I found my confidence and my solution in drugs. So
Yeah, and it was a false sense of purpose, right? I mean, we thought that was our purpose. So, I mean, how long did this go, and what happened? What was your rock bottom, your awakening?
so I had my daughter and I was addicted to pain pills, and she had to stay in the NICU for 6 weeks. And that was what started me going into treatment centers. And it was a revolving door at first, right? It was like,
Right,
okay, let me go here for 7 days, let me go here for 10 days, let me go here for 2 weeks. But I never quite grasped the fact that when I got out, I thought that I was cured. So I would get out of these places and I would be like, okay, now I'm cured and I can do drugs like everybody else. And it's like, no,
right,
people don't people don't do drugs all the time, you know.
right.
But I didn't know that, because all my friends, everybody I knew did drugs, and I couldn't imagine living a life without substances. That didn't even make sense to me. So, but eventually I ended up getting in some trouble, and it was a Tuesday night, and it was a schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is just like a little bit of everything. And when I went to jail that last time, I went for 20 days. And I remember when I went in front of the judge after 20 days, he said, okay, we're going to put you on felony probation. Do you know what that means? And I
Mm.
was like, no. And he said, that means that if you get in trouble, get arrested, fail a drug test in the next 4 years, you're going to go to prison for 4 years. And something went off in my brain at that time. And I thought to myself, man, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to not use drugs, and I don't know how to not get in trouble. So I knew that I had to do something different. Of course, I didn't know what that looked like at all,
Right.
but I knew that what I was doing wasn't working, and I wasn't able to stay off substances for any long period of time.
And I love what you said. I mean, you said, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do this. I don't know why I'm drinking. I don't know why I'm doing drugs. This is something really good to talk about for our listeners and viewers. Is that so? What did you do?
So I ended up going into a sober living facility,
Hmm.
and that's how I got to Athens, Georgia. It was a house with 13 girls. And I was like, what is this, like a sober sorority? It was so like baffling to me. I remember being in a room with all these people, and somebody saying like, I have 87 days, today. And I was like, yeah, right. Like they're
Yeah.
they're really like using in the other rooms. Like there's no way. These people are laughing, these people are smiling, these people are happy. Like, what is this? Like, I just couldn't wrap my head around it, but I was so blessed to be in this house with these 13 women, and they all wanted the same things that I did. They were working toward these things that I wanted. They wanted relationships with their children. They wanted to have a job and a career and a future. They wanted to have healthy relationships. They wanted to be, stable and responsible, and be happy and have things like, a car and a and an apartment, and just like the normal things.
Right.
So
So
it
so
was
bizarre to
super helpful.
so there's a connection. There was a connection, and you saw something different, and was it attractive?
Yeah, absolutely. And the
Yeah.
best part about it was that I remember them saying, we're going to love you till you can love yourself.
Ah,
And that, there was just so much encouragement. And the biggest thing was like I wasn't alone, right? I mean, a house with 13 girls. I was never alone. And so there was that connection, and we truly believe the connection is the opposite of addiction, right?
right. Right.
So having these women to follow, and I had to follow their suggestions,
Yeah.
because I didn't know how to do these things. They told me that I would have to go to meetings, support meetings. They told me that I should get a sponsor, work steps, get a job. They said I had to go, apply for jobs, and I couldn't wear that. They
Right.
taught me that, if I needed a ride, I could, take the bus, or I could ask one of them for a ride, and I didn't have to trade my dignity out to get the things that I needed anymore.
Right.
That they would help me, and that they would support me and walk with me through this journey. And it was just beautiful.
It's incredible what connection is. And we're really good at connection. We don't realize it because when we're in our disease, we get connected with people who live like we do. In recovery, it's just the opposite. We get connected with the exact same type of person, but now they're in recovery, and we're attracted, to that. And it's a community. And did you have any early, cravings and the mental obsession once you got into the sober living house? And if so, how did you handle that?
Absolutely. I remember it was somewhere between step 2 and step 3, and like the maybe like the second month or so, third month, where the obsession was finally lifted. Like I couldn't even go in the bathroom without being triggered. If I saw a Quick Trip bathroom, forget it. Like it was
Yeah.
like Quick
Yeah.
Trip bathroom, Publix bathroom. So they just
Right.
because I spent a lot of time in the bathroom, hiding from
Right.
people. And so bathrooms were like huge. And then like the obsession, I just remember, so when I started working steps, I there was like a lot of like writing involved at first.
Mm.
So I would write, and it would help me process. And then what I found was I found that sharing with other women was a way for me to process things and
Yeah.
get things out, because we hold so much stuff inside, like we're gonna like combust, internally
Right.
combust. But when we start letting those things out and processing, like through people who don't judge us, who just support us and love us where we're at, we're able to get those things out of us. And then something starts happening, with the absence of putting substances in, where your brain starts to work normally again, fire normally again, not go over
Right.
those same holes and pathways. And
Right.
so, yeah, I mean, I remember specifically one time, I can tell you, I was working at a restaurant, and my phone had died. And it was like a Saturday night, and the manager was giving shots to everybody,
Mm.
and I couldn't take shots. I'm living in a sober living. Like
Right.
this is not. I can't do this. You know what I mean? But I was super triggered, and my phone was dead. And I literally had to go in the bathroom and like get on my knees in that restaurant bathroom and pray and cry out to God, like, God, like you're the only one that can help me right now. You're the only one
Wow.
available. My phone's dead. I don't know what to do. This lady's trying to give out shots, and I can't do this. I'm going to get kicked out of my sober living if I take this shot, God. Like I need you to come through for me, and he did. He did. He
It,
gave me
and that's
the
a real
strength.
prayer.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a real prayer. And so that was a victory. Now your faith in this God thing, because for people who are watching and listening, 12-step recovery groups, they're spiritual programs. They're not religious. And that's another show we get, but it's a spiritual program. And And speaking of that, and hearing you, instead of the relapse, that you tried a different way, because step 3 is when we make a decision to turn our will and our life over to a God as we understand him, not as the world or the culture or the church or any religion. So you made that decision, obviously, by trying a different way that was passed on to you by the other women. And tell me about your spiritual awakening. When did you come to and say, I can't do this alone? God, he's either everything or he's nothing.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite verses in that book, actually. And so I want to say it was probably right after my third step into like my fourth step, when we're going over putting down all of our resentment inventory, fear inventory, sex inventory. And I'll tell you, I had a 5-star notebook and 3/4 of it was a sex inventory, because
Right,
that was my currency in addiction, right?
right,
And so it was my problem was I was filled with guilt and shame for the things that I had done, and I really wanted to turn my will and my life, my thoughts, my actions over to the care of this God, but I didn't know how he felt about me. So I remember, taking my fourth step over, to my sponsor to go over it with her in my fifth step, and I remember her saying, I want you to take this home and I want you to meditate on it and see what God wants you to see in this. And I'm like, oh, I don't want God to see this at all. I don't want him to know anything about this. Because when you think about God, sometimes depending on what you grew up with or didn't grow up with, you may think that God is just there with like a gavel ready to judge you and send you down the elevator into that really hot place, and you don't know how he feels about you, you know what I mean? So like I
right,
literally had like I call it like a little come to Jesus talk, like, okay, God, like you want me to trust you, but I don't know how you feel about me. And I've got this 5-star notebook that says you're going to put me in this hot, hot place because I've done some really bad things.
right.
And I remember the next day I went to my mom's house and I was going to visit my daughter, and I was sitting across the kitchen table from her. And she was scribbling with a broken crayon. She had food all over her face. Her hair was a mess. She was probably like 5 or 6. And I was just looking at her with this beaming adoration. Like, this is the most beautiful creature I have ever seen in my life. If you've ever looked at your kids like that, it's just
Yeah.
this love, you can't even contain it. And God said to me in that moment, that's how I feel about you.
Wow.
And that just changed everything, because I understood the love of a father, of a parent. and
Wow.
and I knew that the things that he wanted me to do, the directions he was giving me, were not to be harsh, judgy, make me, do things or not do things, but it was because he cared about me and loved me. And I didn't have to feel guilty and ashamed and try to hide my face from him, because he had so much love for me. Like my daughter, her face was all dirty, her hair was a mess, she's scribbling with a broken crayon. That's what we look like, right?
That's so
And
perfect.
yes.
I love what you said there, because you just confirmed that when I talk to people and talk to men, um, and when I hear people say in a 12-step program, oh my God, I'm about to do the dreaded 4th step. Oh my God, I keep putting off the 4th step. And they ask me if we are dreading the 4th step, it's because we didn't do step 3 correctly. Once again, is we made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understand him. Okay. It's our personal relationship. My God is Jesus Christ. I mean, it works for me. It makes perfect sense to me. And why would a God that understands me and I understand him, why is he going to take me into the 4-step feeling guilty and shame? Okay. And Jamie, you know this as well as I do, of people who've done this. Actually, when we go to the 4-step, we get to see what we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
That's the great thing about it, right? And then the step that we look at our resentments, and when we see the role that we play in it, it's a very consistent role of what we play in it, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Which right there, now our character defects are exposed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
our character defects are actually the things today that I recognize. That's why I drank and did drugs. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
relapse behaviors that I recognize today. And I know you know that and can relate to that. So fast forwarding after the spiritual awakening, obviously you get out of the sober living house. You've made this your life. I mean, you have made this your life, and so walk me through a little bit about what you're doing today for women.
Absolutely. So I developed um a class that I teach, and it is a trauma informed discipleship, because
Mm,
trauma and dismantling false beliefs is something that we have got to do, not just for women, for everybody, right? Like, we have to dismantle. I mean, we have to do it every day, really. You know what I mean? We have to
hmm.
remind ourselves who we are every day, because the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And what he does is he makes us forget who we are, is what
Yeah,
he does.
yeah. I love what you said because we talk about trauma a lot on Into the Rock, that we need to stop focusing on addiction, but why the addiction? And
Hmm.
everyone's an addict. It just doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It's seeking visible things to try to fix our invisible problems. Okay, it's addiction, and it all stems from trauma. And I was seeking for something to ease the pain and suffering, and that's what with trauma and trauma triggers. And I love that you're working with that. One thing I do want to talk about, I don't know if I'm the one who probably got off topic, but it just came to me. Why is it so important that women should work with women in recovery, especially a new woman that comes into recovery, to work with another female? Walk us through that.
Absolutely. So this is something I talk about a lot, because I'm telling you, the biggest thing that will get people off track is relationships.
Hmm.
The biggest thing. Um it is so important, because first of all, we need to learn how to make healthy connections and relationships with other women. Number 1.
Hmm.
Um Number 2, in recovery, a lot of times we are very uncomfortable in the way that we feel. We are uncomfortable in our body, right? We hear people say it all the time when they're telling their story. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. Well, when you take the substances away and you're in early recovery, you really don't feel comfortable. And
Yeah,
you're looking
good
for
point.
things to put on top of it. And what a better thing to use for escape
Yeah,
than relationships and sex, right?
right,
So that is that will distract us from taking that time to work on ourselves, right? And we want to make sure it's someone that has, the correct motives, because sometimes um men will try to be a woman's sponsor. Maybe they might be try to be each other's sponsors, or unfortunately, there are some men that use things as a form of control. They're still not healed in certain ways, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And women have got to stay with other women and have these healthy boundaries to keep themselves safe, because in early recovery, you are still traumatized, you are still in those old patterns, you still don't know what healthy love looks like, you still don't know what it looks like to respect yourself, and you don't know what you're worthy of. And
right.
I tell people all the time, like, the person, okay, not 100% of the time, but probably 99, the person that you wanted to date in month 1 of recovery is not the person that you are going to want to date in month 12 of recovery.
That's facts. That's real talk, and that is very well put. And speaking from the man side, this is good. This is good conversation. Is that men will want to come in and be the white knight, Yeah, I can get you sober. Okay. Some of it with really pure motives. Okay. And what happens is what I've seen in early relationships and early recovery is that because we haven't worked through these steps or worked through our past traumas and rebuild ourselves to take care of ourselves, we're constantly being triggered by the other partner. All right. And we're being triggered, and because it's triggering maybe past childhood trauma, that the way a dad said something to her, the way a mom said something to him, and it triggers and it goes into resentments. All right. We still haven't worked the steps, so we don't know how to process resentments. All right. So we stuff them, and they always end up in a disaster, and both parties always end up going back out, and drinking and drugging. So it's this cycle. Um, but yet we want to date. We want to get back in the game, Jamie. I mean, what's your suggestion to your women on that?
So I will tell you just how my sponsor told me. So I fought my sponsor on this for so long until I had some consequences. And she said, Jamie, just come with me, just do these steps, do all the steps, and then you can date. But I
Yeah.
want you to do all the steps first. And I fought her on it and I fought her on it. And I remember I had I was living at the sober living. So my sober living was on a campus. So we had apartments. So I stayed at my sober living for actually 3.5 years. But I ended up dating this guy. This guy came through. He had 6 months, but his dad was a preacher and he knew the Bible front and back, and I had probably like almost 18 months. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is the guy. And my sponsor's like, don't do it. And I'm like, yeah, but his dad's a preacher. And, we both like share this, love for God. And we dated for probably 2.5 months, and I decided that I didn't want to date him anymore
And why is
because
that?
um I didn't want to date him because we were doing things we were doing things that I wasn't comfortable with in that
So
time.
the triggers.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and
And
and so you're recognizing that you're living outside of God's will or spiritual principle, whatever it is. It doesn't matter
right.
what it is, but
Yes.
that's recovery. That's my whole
Mhm.
point of getting to that. Is now you're recognizing these old behaviors and don't want to go down that road. Am I
Right,
accurate?
exactly. I didn't
Yeah.
it just didn't feel right to me anymore to do those things anymore.
Right.
And so I broke up with him, and he left the sober living and went back out and didn't come back in for 2 years. He didn't come back into recovery for 2 years. And I said I will never have somebody's blood on my hands like that ever again. Never. And that was
Yeah.
a hard lesson for me. And
Yeah.
obviously we know we can't keep anyone from relapsing or not. But if I would have kept my hand out of that situation, you know what I mean, and followed what my very wise sponsor said, things may
Right.
have turned out differently. I mean, he's doing wonderful now. He's married to a wonderful woman, but
Great.
but still,
Good
I
story.
don't ever want to negatively influence somebody's recovery or distract them in any way from their growth.
Right. And the good news is that a male and a female that have worked the 12 steps and are working an active program, they're trusting God, they're cleaning house, they're helping others. Um, when God puts them together, two people in recovery, it's also very powerful. It's a very healthy relationship. Two people working towards the same thing, they go here. If
Right.
there's no chaos. So there are very successful stories in early recovery. So in summary, what Jamie's saying, early recovery before relationships, uh, we're suggesting, working all the 12 steps with a sponsor of the same sex that has got a lot of sobriety. And then we have a new set of glasses put on. We start seeing people, man, I would have never dated this person before I worked all this stuff. We start seeing those things. So, I want to give you the stage. Um, Share with us your faith. I know you're very, very outspoken about your faith and how important that is to you. Walk us through that.
So I actually was in a 4.5 year discipleship in In my sober living, the counselor that came 2 weeks before I got to sober living, who was a pastor, um, I studied in a discipleship under him for 4.5 years. I am I am dedicated and in love with Jesus. He comes first in everything. And I stay very close with the Holy Spirit. I'm very sensitive to the Holy Spirit. That's where I get my leading, my direction, my wisdom on things, like what should I do, what should I not do. Um, God is everything to me. He is my protector, my defender, my provider, my healer. And so I believe in deliverance. I believe in the prophetic. I believe in healing. I believe that there is a great shaking and then revival coming.
Yeah.
And I really just like I love to tell people about like the true love of God, like everybody, because there's such a skewed view. I grew up religious, like in a specific denomination that was very works based, but I knew nothing about relationship with God. I knew nothing about like the Holy Spirit. I knew nothing about like the gifts. I just knew that if you checked A, B, and C, then you could get married in this kind of church and you would go to heaven. Like,
Right.
you know.
Right. Right.
um so it was very different than actually like getting to know God and like putting my trust in God. And that took time, you know what I mean? Like it took like little things. Like a lot of people say they can't hear the voice of God. I can tell you this, when you get that bad feeling in your stomach that tells you like don't go that way, that's not a good idea, that's a no from God.
Yeah,
That's
that's
how you're
right.
hearing God say that's not a good idea, you know what I mean? So for like probably about a year and a half, all I ever heard God say was no. I couldn't hear yes and I couldn't hear it, but I could hear no. And so from there, the more intimate time that I spent with God, um the more I began to recognize what his voice was.
Mhm.
And so that like knowing the voice of God, knowing like what his will for me is, knowing what my identity is in God has been the like the things that have shaped me. Cause I tell people like, oh, like, why do I need to know my identity in God? And I'll say, okay, say you go to a party and you go in there with like a t-shirt with holes in it and like some jeans that don't fit right and some scrappy sneakers, you're going to walk in one way, but you go into this place and you wearing some Gucci heels and a bad suit with a pencil skirt, you're going to walk in a little bit differently, right? You're going to know your
Right.
authority, you're going to know who
Right.
you are, you're going to know whose you are. And in this season it's very important to understand who you are and how God feels about you and the authority that you have, because of the things that are coming against people in this season. There's like a lot of warfare in this season,
Hmm.
and it is really really important for people to be suited up in their armor and in their identity, so that
Yeah.
you have the authority. The fruits of the spirit belong to us: joy, peace, righteousness, patience, kindness, like all these things. Like, so if we're not having peace, like, and we're having like fear, we can say like, fear, you got to go. Like, I
Right.
am a daughter of the king and I live in peace because Jesus is the prince of peace.
Yeah.
So, you have to that's what I was saying earlier about the devil always tries to make you forget who you are.
Yeah.
So,
That's well said. That's exactly well said. And finding our purpose and redefining our purpose and back to your trauma coaching with these women. What are some of the things that you do? What's kind of like the common denominator, the common story you hear? I mean, okay, let's just say sexual abuse. Women who have been sexually abused and that trauma that they're carrying. How do you work through that with them?
oh, and that is one of the hardest things to work through, people, with faith in God, also with having
Right.
like what, where was God? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like through this, and why did this happen? You know what I mean?
Right.
And there comes, a point where um you have to understand the character and nature of God. Like I can tell you like that women have to, I help them to be able to forgive people, right? And it's kind of like in the steps when we see what we're really good at, right? In that fourth step, we're
Right.
also seeing like what our part was. Like maybe it
Mm,
wasn't a good idea to go to that person's house when we were, on drugs. You know what I'm saying? Not that we
right.
deserved what happened, but we
Right.
didn't make a great choice there. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I can tell you like myself for my own, things, I had been sexually assaulted in my addiction, and I asked the Lord, like, where were you, and when I was crying, and he said, I was holding you and I was crying too,
Yeah.
and it's like, just like revealing to these women the heart of the Father and how he feels about them, and that they carrying unforgiveness and anger and bitterness in our hearts only hurts us, right? Because we're drinking poison trying to make that person that did that to us hurt, and it doesn't work like that, right? But
No.
when we forgive them and we ask God to forgive them, we give God the freedom to take care of that situation in his own way, in
Exactly.
his own timing.
Well said. That's so well said. In a nutshell, is accepting the role that I played in it. Wait a minute, I played a role in it? Yeah, the role I played in is I chose to hold on to the resentment. Now, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean we forget it. I know you tell them this. It's not, we don't forget it, right? But we forgive them. And then we really get deeper and look at the way they were raised, you know?
Right.
And I always say this to people I talk to, and because I can relate, sexually abused survivor. And when I talk to someone, I always go way back and I said, listen, the person who assaulted you, let's just go back in time and pretend. When they were 4 years old playing in the front yard with their other kids, all right, the thought of them ever doing an act like this probably never entered their mind. Okay. They were just pure fun kids. But what happened is they were taught this. They were taught this. And today, we're stopping the cycle and actually using our story like you do to help others. And so the people, if you're, struggling with this and working with Jamie and all this stuff, I truly believe we're chosen. We're chosen, and that way we get to look at it through God's perspective, not the world's or the culture. And campaigning to, send them on death row, like you said, God will take care of that. But that's not the motive; is to forgive.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And extending that forgiveness frees you, and you're so
Right.
right about, when you think about the people that hurt you. Like, I mean, I suffered from serious rejection issues with my mom. She
Mm.
was 15, right? When she had me, but like she
Oh
would, like, my
wow.
first memory of her was saying screaming at me, I wish you were never born. You know what I mean? She would say those things to me, and I would, go to the Lord, like, but my mom, this, you know what I mean? And he kind of opened my eyes and gave me a little bit of a story about what my mom went through as a child,
Right.
So
Right.
like these things, people are raised by imperfect parents, or sometimes they don't have parents at all. You don't know what people go through. So we want forgiveness and grace and mercy from God, and we have to be willing to extend that to everybody, and that
Yeah.
takes practice.
Forgiveness feels good when we're receiving it, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard giving it sometimes. It's hard giving it sometimes. And once we do that, truly do it, we are giving God permission to show us grace and perform the supernatural, you know, and that's what you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today, Jamie, if you haven't truly forgiven. Because when we have a
Mhm.
resentment, okay, it blocks me from God. He blocks me from God. But when we remove that resentment, that's when he comes in and performs the supernatural, and he
Mhm.
gets to show the world who he is, not tell them. And that's what I admire
Right.
about you and what you're doing. Um, Jamie, how can we everybody get in contact with you? We'll have it in the description, but what's a main site that they can go to for your services?
Yeah, so Jamie Tall on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and you can email me if you have anything. Also, I also teach trauma informed massage therapy to go along
Mm.
with, because trauma is also stored in the body. So,
Yeah,
what a great way if you're trying to work out trauma, you're doing steps. You can do, get some trauma informed massage therapy so you can understand about healthy touch and, that you are worthy of good things, and get those things that are stored in your muscles out, and
that's
flush
an
it all
interesting
out from the inside
that's
out.
an interesting topic because to this day, my fiance Lee, when we are traveling and speaking, she loves massages, and she challenged me, and I told her I've done it one time and couldn't do it. It creeped me out, and I tried it again, and I'm still not there. I usually, 5 minutes into it, I said no more, and just that touch. So we'll have to come have you back on and talk about that.
Yeah,
But I
for sure.
recognize today, as a result of working with our friend Dr. Rob Kelly, and through trauma, um, I know where it's coming from. It's a symptom, and I'm not alone. So, Jamie, we are so grateful that you came on, and we want you to come on again, talk about different subjects, and be the voice to the women in recovery, because they need you. Let's wrap up with this. Someone who is struggling right now, um, with this disease of addiction or drug addiction. We know the go-to answer is to pray. That counts. We have to listen. Number two, ask for help. Very cliche. That counts. What's your word of advice or your suggestion to the one right now that's really shaking and baking?
I would say to imagine what your life could look like if you were as successful as you could possibly think. Like,
Wow.
don't put limitations on it, because I will tell you, as a person who started her own business in sober living, you can do more than you could ever think or imagine in recovery. Like, the floodgates
Absolutely.
open. So whatever dreams that you have, like, you can achieve them 100%.
Absolutely, and exceed it. It blows you away what happens. Jamie Tall, recovery coach, incredible YouTube content creator. She's a recovery advocate. She's a hope dealer, and dealing hope. And we were so glad to have you a part of the Into the Rock family, and have you on. And we will have all the descriptions, below, for y'all to click on. Also, leave comments wherever you're watching this from. Ask questions, and we'll get them to Jamie or myself, and to answer. And also in the comments, share what you want us to talk about on future shows. We want your ideas, and make sure you subscribe and like to this. Jamie, we appreciate you so much and everything that you do to help people in need, and I know it helps you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Gives me purpose to share. So thank you.
Beautiful. Well, we got 3 words here at Into the Rock. It's got 3 words, and it's got 8 letters. It's only got one meaning, and that is, from everyone here at Into the Rock, we love you.